omega-3 fatty acids are the most prone to oxidation.
They're super prone. They're hard to handle. And when we look at the omega-3 index, you can see that the average American is below 4%. So you actually saw like even the group of smokers that had high omega-3, they actually looked on the graph that they were doing slightly better than the group that was non-smokers but had low omega-3.
The gummy issue is a really great illustration of where not every manufacturer is aware that creatine, for example, isn't stable in solution. If it's added when the gummies are still like in a liquid form, then it's going to break down into its breakdown product, which I believe is creatinine. But then if it's added later, once the gummy's already kind of like solidified, then there's a higher likelihood of it staying, being conserved. Manufacturers don't know that, consumers don't know that.
Cacao is a really good food at, again, removing cadmium, lead out of the soil. What we've seen through the lab testing is there's a big variation is one side on the cacao beans, but there tend to be higher markers of these heavy metals. So if you don't know anything, I wouldn't go with a plant-based cacao product. That would be like a
heavy metal bomb.
Potentially.
Yeah. What creatine I recommend for women?
I think it should be.
Well, Oliver, welcome back to The Genius Life. How you doing?
It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. This is round 2. We recorded in my studio about a year ago in Los Angeles, and now where are we? We are in Denmark, Copenhagen.
Now we're actually here in Copenhagen, Aaron, our home turf.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
Well, thanks for welcoming me. I'm super excited. Because of you and Puori, I'm here to speak at the Copenhagen Health Week, which I'm super excited for.
It's going to be a good weekend. We have a lot of good people coming in, and it's going to be fun.
What can we expect? Keynote presentations, groundbreaking science.
Yeah, and a lot of also exhibits where you can actually try things. So there'll be like workouts running, there's saunas, like all the classic ice bath and fun stuff. You can also go a little bit more into the longevity or biohacking, probably on getting some weird sleep path or something like that. But it's going to be a lot of fun stuff.
I'm so excited. You took me yesterday to 130 Labs, right? I'm not like, I don't do a ton of the quote unquote biohacking, like, tech stuff.
No.
But it was really fun to get to wear the Normatec boots and to immerse myself in these like cool meditations. And then we did cryo.
Yeah. But I think it's all about creating those small spaces for yourself in a big city where you can actually carve out time to meditate, be on a PEMF mat while you have you get your lymph drainage out of your legs of like flying or whatever you're doing in a Normatec booth pants there. So I think when you can do stuff like that, it's
great for recovery. Yeah. And I haven't been sleeping that well because of jet lag. And it was a good time. Well, I'm excited to have you back because, the supplement industry there's a lot, I find, of misconceptions about it, especially today. There's, I think many of us find ourselves amidst this tug of war between mainstream allopathic, medicine, the sort of medical industrial complex, and, being confused by the talking points that you sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes get from that side of the aisle, so to speak, about how the world of supplements is completely unregulated and unproven and untested and all this stuff. And then the other side is like, well, no, actually, many people find their lives themselves regularly benefited by supplements and many of the offerings of the wellness industry. And I find that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So you're an industry insider. You're one of the GOATs who I consider to be a very reputable source, a very transparent source from within the industry, and you create some of my favorite products. So
appreciate that.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on.
It's good. Yeah.
I guess let's start. There was a really cool paper that I sent you before we started rolling. One of the authors is Alan Aragon, who's, I consider one of the GOATs in the nutrition space. And I think it was a really important paper because it sought to debunk some of these myths that, for example, supplements are completely unregulated.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is apparently misinformation.
It apparently is, yeah. And I think also just like, where is supplement in this game? Like if you're looking at like pharma is one thing, right? Like it's treating disease, it's symptoms, it's like very specific. Supplement is a food supplement. So like you have food on the other hand, right? Like it's like whatever you're getting all your nutrients from in general is coming from food and should come from food. And then you have supplements that hopefully can bridge some of the food gaps and some of the gaps that actually are harder to get from food. I think that's where you should see it like as a key. And you can measure that too but it's definitely not the same way as pharma, and it shouldn't be compared to pharma either.
Yeah, it's literally a supplement.
It's
so
literally
it's
a
not
supplement.
it's not misrepresenting itself.
No.
We're talking about dietary supplements, and if you look up the word supplement in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, I mean it's meant to supplement, to augment a diet, which should ideally be whole foods. But even our whole foods today are becoming nutrient depleted.
Oh yeah, and it's like for some of the nutrients, it's getting really hard to get enough of them. Like whether it's like, as you say, the source that we're having, like getting our broccoli and our carrots or whatever we're having, like might not have the same amount of these micronutrients per serving as they had back in the day when they were growing, let's say, more wild and less farmed. And I think that's one side. And then the demand of what we are getting is another side of it, like adding to that equation, because it's clear that we're living in like stressful times with a lot of different impacts that might also impact our bodies. And then finally, if we're looking at what we're typically eating, that is like not getting better and better as like a whole population. We see more fast food and like ultra processed foods in there instead of like a whole foods based diet. So you have a lot of detractors here, and that doesn't give a plus. So it leaves, I think, even more room for adding supplements to your diet.
Amen. And you hear this this rhetoric a lot that big wellness is now worth more than the pharmaceutical industry, and yet the pharmaceutical industry is often made out to be the bad guy. Why aren't we pointing a finger at quote unquote big wellness, right?
Yeah.
But big wellness encompasses gyms, it encompasses food, the organic foods industry.
That's big. Yeah,
huge.
That's a big umbrella.
It's a huge umbrella. But when you actually zoom in on supplements. Mm-hmm. According to this, to the review, let me get the first author actually, so that people can look it up. But it was Jose Antonio, who's a great follow. I actually follow him on X. Darren Kando is another author on the paper. Anyway, the supplement industry in 2023 was only worth about, I say only, but $54 billion. So you compare that to the $670 billion at the pharmaceutical industry. It's way smaller. It's more than 10 times smaller.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, again, like I wouldn't compare those two industries because they're so different in like what they're trying to achieve as well.
And they're both important.
Yeah, it's not like you should neglect either or. But I think there's also something about the balance in it. Like how much money are we spending on like the reactive side of it, like where the pharma is mainly reactive, right? Like it's something that you're doing after you become sick. And I think like where the supplement has an opportunity to play as well is in the prevention side of it. Like it's like preventing some of these micronutrient gaps that you're seeing before you potentially get sick. So like I would love to spend more, and I think this goes to the healthcare systems, like it goes across the pond, like whether it's Europe or US, but like we were a little bit more proactive in our approach. Like one thing is giving pharma, but if you're still not working out, not sleeping, and you have a horrible diet, you're like that should be a really good place to start as well, or add it on. Like it's not like you should eliminate if you have something like a disease. You should follow your protocol and your doctor, of course. But I think we just spend way too much time on that side of the fence compared to what we could.
Yeah, it's about, I think, taking a proactive approach. Like supplements are often, I think, intended for a more proactive approach to one's health. Whereas it's great to be able to have medicine for when you need it.
For sure. Yeah.
But as you mentioned,
we need both.
Yeah. Amen. So there is a lot of confusion today with regards to, sourcing. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love about you guys, you go above and beyond with regards to testing, certifications, all that stuff. There was a recent tweet that went viral. It was written by my friend Dan Go, who's I think his handle on X is Fit Founder, but he basically produced this expose on X showing that a lot of supplements sold on these big box online retailers are often counterfeit. Not all the time, but
can be.
Yeah.
And I think like one thing is like obviously we get more concerned when it becomes something we are consuming. But if you look at these big platforms, they do have counterfeits on like all the different like if there's something that's a big industry, there's a counterfeit in some kind of way. So whether it's like jewelry or electronics and so on. But unfortunately, we're seeing that on food supplement side as well. Some of these big boxes, and we can talk a little bit about that as well, like Amazon, like the largest probably supplement retailer in the US at least. they're trying actually to do more and more measures to put in place to be a little more in control of what's coming on their platform. Is it perfect yet? Not at all. Like, there will be flaws. And again, if you're in doubt, like I know I saw that post too, right? So, and if you're in doubt if there could be a counterfeit of this type of product, go to the brand directly. Like, I would say, go to their website. That's at least the most secure way that you're getting something from the brand. Like, we haven't gone that far that we see hackers come in that way and steal the orders through the brands. But when you go to these platforms, yes, there's a chance that there's something that's not supposed to be there.
So go to the brand. Yeah, that's great advice. So when it comes to being able to identify quality products, I mean, what would you say consumers should look out for ideally?
So I think, and there's many avenues you can go down into here. So when we talk about food supplements, and especially the type of food supplements we do at Puori, like the heavy evidence-based basics in your toolbox, like the omega-3, the vitamin D, the protein powder, not like the newest kid on the block, the newest science, but the ones that we know of. There's like, when we talk omegas or protein powders, there's a few things you want to pay attention to. One is it's a food supplement, so there should be an active ingredient. And that's where I think the industry has a long way to go still. And that's measuring the active ingredient in the actual product. Because we've seen as well, especially when you come into vitamins and minerals and so on, they can vary quite a lot in a capsule. They can vary quite a lot depending on how efficient, how high quality is the co-manufacturer, the facility that you're working with, or are we even testing that final product? So active ingredient, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it's like it's critical. So that's one side of it. The second component is purity, and I think purity can be a lot of different things. Purity can be the absence of heavy metals, for example, if it's something that's sourced from the nature or from ground. It can be like the potential microplastics. It can be the things that are sneaking in through the supply chain as well. So it can be various things in various products. So there's different things to pay attention to. But when you're consuming a concentrated raw material, you should be aware of purity as well. I think that's something we've seen now in a lot of the studies that's been out there. The recent study by the Clean Label Project earlier this year had like 83% of America's protein powders through like a chemical laboratory, and they tested for heavy metals. And one of the things that they found was 47% of America's protein powders contained heavy metals above the standards set by Proposition 65. We can talk about if Proposition 65 is strict standard. It probably is in some shape or forms, especially when you compare it to food. So we'll come back to that in a second. But it shows also that there's something to be aware of. So here's a purity issue. So when we know there's a potential purity issue, we should put in some standards. As in, like, whether it's driven by, I would prefer that this would be regulated by an external validated organ, like the Clean Label Project, or even like regulated, right, eventually. But for now, you can have a private player in that space too. So you have the purity angle and you have the potency angle, basically. Those are the two key metrics. Then when you look at different products, if you take an omega-3 as an example, there is a different side of metrics too. And that is, how stable is this product actually? Oxidation levels in omega-3s is super important, and it will vary significantly. So you will see some brands having, maybe 10x the amount of oxygen in a fish oil versus another brand. So you can, and it's actually really hard to control. So you got to be really deliberate and quality concerned through the entire process, from like catching the fish to pressing the fish to encapsulating to transportation and so on. Like, that's kind of the supply chain. So it will vary a little bit from product to product. But if to take away from your question, two headlines is active ingredient, measurement of active ingredient, and I would say basic impurity.
When it comes to potency, there's the amount that's on the label, indicated on the label. And then does that also, do potency tests also measure not just the amount that's on the label, but the amount that's in the product?
No. So like that's a really good question. And I think that's where my point is that we should have a third-party validation at some point. Right now we don't. We have to live up. So let's say the FDA says you put 2,000 milligrams of omega-3 in 3 capsules of omega-3. There will be some EPA, DHA, like the different long-chain fatty acids that you'll find. We have to write out, like, we get 1,250 milligrams of this, and then there's like label claim requirements. So if somebody were to test it, Like if somebody took this through a lab, we should be within certain limits of what we put on the label. But nobody's really measuring up against that on a batch basis. So it's like, and I've never heard somebody come test us externally to validate if our label claim were correct. Like never, after 15 years in the business and a lot of. But so that's where, and with the knowledge that we have and we've seen, because we do third-party validate label claim up against all our products.
Wow.
Every single batch that is in the market is up against. So we can see we can see there's a variance, and we also see that when we see the broader studies that are done in the space, you can see pretty big variance in how good are they actually to getting, whether it's, we've seen a recent study on melatonin in melatonin capsules. And, there were some brands that had like much more melatonin than we're writing on, and some had almost none. And we've seen that in creatine as well. Like it's at like higher amount, maybe not as much higher amounts, but significantly lower amounts, especially in the gummies.
Oh yeah,
where we saw like almost no creatine in creatine gummies. So you're just basically getting gummies.
Yeah,
yeah. So I think label claim as substantiation is one thing in terms of what you're saying, but the other thing is third party validation.
Yeah, because I mean, there's variation, as you mentioned, in terms of like, I mean, the I would imagine just the fish that you guys are sourcing for your fish oil. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I've often cited IFO certification as one of the things to look out for when selecting a fish oil, and you guys are IFO certified. What's that like certification process like?
I think that's probably the best like overall certification you can have, especially for fish oils. So like what IFOS does is like they have like a 5-star rewarding program where there's like, do they meet label claim? So there's label claim again. Do they meet different purity metrics? Like that could be the absence of heavy metals within there. Like they set a range that they want you to hit below on your daily serving, and like dioxins, furans, like different things you can find in the sea and in fish. And then finally, they also have the oxidation side, and that's also why we really like them on that, because we think that oxidation, especially in fish oil, is a critical component. Like it might not be as relevant in, let's say a multivitamin or, something that won't oxidize the same way, but like an oil like that, like it's really critical. So, so they do a really good job. But I would also highly encourage that I don't think all brands share all their batches and get them uploaded. You can find the brand and you'll find a few batches in there, but really being able to find every single batch, I think for some of these where there's definitely variation in oxidation markers. We see that too. Maybe not as much in purity markers if you're sourcing kind of from the same origin, same areas, but you'll see label claim. So I think those are like places where I would pay attention as a consumer. And again, if they have the IFO certification, you know that it's a brand that actually care. And if you can find every single batch of your product in there, they care a lot.
And how does it work? You pay them, right?
Yeah, right now you pay them to it. So that's also why you're getting probably the best brands is on their website, because you pay them and they publish their lab report on it. So and they got to do that and obviously pay for their lab testing, but there's still like a third party validation, because they are not testing the raw material. So often, and this is something that I can see can cause more kind of confusion and frustration with consumers, because when we see these COAs floating around, people put stuff up on their website. Hey, look at this. We have almost no oxygen in our fish oil. Often what they've taken is like the lab report generated in the production facility, which is very different from what IFOS is doing. They're taking finished product. And a lot of that oxidation that comes through, encapsulation process, transportation, just handling all across the chain, age, and so on. So what you really want to make sure, and I think that's good for IFOS as well, that they actually they get the final product, whether it's from the website or from Amazon or wherever they kind of can ship it from, so that the brand will like have to show like something that's actual in the market and not like a raw material.
Yeah, I mean, if you're spending money on fish oil, you want it to be as high quality as possible. It's like one of the few supplements that I think you should really be buying the best that you can afford, because, as you mentioned, omega-3 fatty acids are the most prone to oxidation.
They're super prone. They're hard to handle.
They're hard to handle.
They're hard to handle.
Because they're a polyunsaturated fat. So my listeners know that among fatty acids, you've got your saturated fatty acids, which are the most chemically stable. They tend to be solid at room temperature. And then as you get more and more unsaturated, the oil, you essentially go from a fat, like because you wouldn't call tallow a fat.
No.
I mean, you wouldn't call tallow an oil. Tallow is a fat. It's solid at room temperature. So you get, as you become more and more unsaturated, you become more and more fluid. And that's actually why fish are so abundant in omega-3s, because it keeps, at cold temperatures, their cell membranes highly fluid, which is one of the amazing aspects of biochemistry. And we consume those fats, and that's why they're so essential to brain health, because they keep our neuronal cell membranes nice and fluid and supple and responsive to the external environment. So, but as you get more and more unsaturated, the fatty acid becomes more prone to oxidation. And so you go from a saturated fatty acid to a monounsaturated fatty acid, like oleic acid, which is found in extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil. And then you become even more unsaturated than that with polyunsaturated fatty acids. And omega-3s and omega-6s are essential polyunsaturated fats. And omega-3s are even more unsaturated than the omega-6s.
So I'll tell you a fun story to that, because when we were looking at this like range a little bit, when we started to play, we have a product in Europe you don't have in the US, which is a liquid fish oil. And the reason why we actually don't have the liquid fish oil is as soon as you open the bottle, like, there might be different routes of minimizing the oxygen exposure after opening it. But as soon as you open it, you get more oxygen into the bottle. So what we saw in these like different trials, we saw that the oxidation numbers on the liquid fish oil, when they're just pure liquid fish oil, would go pretty crazy high compared to the starting point, even after 30 days. And if you know yourself as a consumer, you don't consume a bottle of fish oil like from most brands in like 5 or 7 days, right? Like it's something that will, last maybe 45 days. So we were playing with these more staple oils, like to actually see if we could add that in and slow down the oxidation process of the oil. Yes, you do get a little bit of, like, we're using an MCT oil. So we mix a little bit of the MCT oil in the liquid fish oil. And we have actually shown then that the oxidation numbers will significantly decline of the total product. So that gives us an opportunity to play with. But that's coming from that same, our science team were looking at what's most stable, what can we add, what will slow down this oxidation process. And can we do it without, when we stir it in, actually not making it more, broken to begin with. So, yeah.
Well, you can also add antioxidants.
You add antioxidants
right?
too, and we do that as well. So that's definitely another side of it. But we're really seeing that clear picture of, the consumer is not consuming it right away.
Right.
So
that's why you don't want to buy like liquid, like omega-3s. Yeah.
Especially not in like big sizes. You want to make sure that they're fairly small so you can control that oxidation exposure for the shortest period of time. And
that's another argument. I mean, not to bring it back to, not to bring the conversation to seed oils, because I know it's so controversial. But the ultra processed seed oils that are now being talked about so much on social media. I mean, one of the major problems with them is, are these oxidative processes. And if you just picture the big jug of corn oil sitting out at room temperature by the stove, and for how long that's typically, how long somebody will keep that bottle open with those fats exposed to warmth, to oxygen. I mean, it's just it's a recipe for this oxidative process to catalyze.
Expedite.
I mean, it happens to olive oil too, but that's why we say, when people ask me what kinds of olive oil I should buy, olive oil is way safer from the standpoint of its chemical stability, because it's primarily monounsaturated fat. Oleic acid is one of the reasons why extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil is so good for you. But one of the things we say, nonetheless, is you want to buy them in small bottles, because you want to keep the oil fresh. You want those fats to be fresh and healthy, and so that you can derive the full benefit from it, not just for your health, but because that's what you're spending money on.
Sure. That actually made me think about something we're doing at home. So I'm like, I'm gonna go. No, so like because we buy from a place where we can actually get it's probably almost a gallon in a metal container from the farm. It's a phenomenal olive oil. But I'm thinking now, even though we don't open and close it and open and close it, we pour it over to smaller dispensers, and we use it like with bigger families, so we use it quite fast, I think. But I'm still like curious to see what would the oxidation be on that, like when we're at the end of the range. I don't know that, so I want to. Yeah. I feel like I want to throw that to a chemistry lab.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to fearmonger. It's probably still pretty good, because olive oil is rich in antioxidants, and it's, again, primarily monounsaturated fat, but there are still some polyunsaturated fats in olive oil. But it makes me think of when I was a child, we had this big, clear plastic tub of corn oil by my stove at all times. And it would take months to go through that. We were frying all of our food in it that my mom and grandma would make me growing up, like the chicken cutlets and whatever, all with this big, huge tub of corn oil. And it's just like a chemical horror show.
Yeah, it's not easy. No, but
but that's why pills. Do you recommend do you make the recommendation to keep the pills like in the fridge, or I don't think that's necessary? Do you?
It depends a little bit on where you live and obviously how warm it is. So over here in the Nordics, you don't necessarily have to. I would still say in the summer I would keep it in the fridge. Just like we don't have AC the same way, so it might actually get quite hot inside during the summer. But I would say, if it's room temperature, it looks very stable. Some feel that it's actually more pleasant when they're cold. Capsules tend to get a little crisper, like there's a little different feel to it, I would say, but I think that's more of a preference.
I've heard it also can help minimize fishy burps, which I've never experienced, but apparently some do.
I think the number one thing of fishy burps is that the fish oil you're consuming is rancid. So, like, if it's really rancid, like, you will taste the fish right away. Like, that's one side. Like, you can't use that as your only guidance because a lot of brands will actually use, like, a coating on the shell, like on the capsule, so that it doesn't dissolve right away, so you won't feel it, and it will go a little further down your system. You won't taste that, like, fish burps feel. But I wouldn't recommend putting, like, that, like, shellac coating on your capsule. Like, doesn't make any sense either. So, like, what is the best way of like avoiding fish burps in general is having this super high quality, low oxidation numbers fish oil to begin with, and then doing it sometimes with food. So you think about if it's a gelatin capsule it's in, it will dissolve. Like if you just take a sip of coffee with it, and you will probably taste a little bit more because it will dissolve faster, versus if you like take it with food and bring it together with a meal. We have a ton of people taking them without food, feeling nothing and feeling great. But I would just recommend if you're a little more sensitive, take it with food.
And maybe you can speak briefly to the benefits of fish oil. I mean, like what?
I can speak briefly on it. There's a lot of benefits and so on. Like now we're also in Denmark here for this, and we are so the regulations in Denmark. So if we circle back to regulations versus US, they're slightly different. So there's a lot of there's good things, and there's like, let's say, things we as brands and some would say is not as good. But one of the good thing is like a product has to be registered on the market before it's like you're able to sell it. You can register. You don't have to show it and do anything, but the product will actually be registered in like the equivalent of the FDA. So there'll be like the Danish food authorities. They will know that this product is registered and available to go for sale on a marketplace. They don't come and check up on it before you start selling it, but they will do audits at our facility once or twice a year. Like that depends a little bit. So they will actually stop by and they will see, okay, we created new products. We put this on the label. Do that meet like the different requirements? Like they will just look at us from the outside in. It's not like they're taking it, throwing it to a lab to test if we're up against, but it's more the label claim requirements, which we also have in the US with the FDA. So you got to live up to those. But they will check on that, and then they will check up on your marketing. And in Europe, we have EFSA, European Food Safety Authorities, and they have fairly strict things that what brands and brand owners can say on, claiming things. So on a fish oil, you can say it's good for your brain, like it's obviously a key part of how your brain works and so on. So it's critical for keeping a normal functioning brain. We can't say it will cure anything in the brain, which is not supposed to either, right? But it's a different part of that. We'll say it's really good for your eyes. Same. It will help with normal vision. Most people would like to have normal vision, right?
Yeah, amen.
And the same with the heart. So those are the key things. What we do obviously see is it plays a critical role in inflammation as well, like the balance between omega-3 and omega-6. We can't go in and say, even though there's lots of studies showing if you're consuming it, you can actually change the balances in your blood, in blood work, but we can't go in and say that it's anti-inflammatory as is, even though it's clear that omega-3 from the outside versus omega-6 is the anti-inflammatory component, which is part of a balance. So it's important to have both. So we don't need to fearmonger the omega-6s either, but like it's part of that balance. And I think if you look into inflammation and inflammaging and all the other things, like that route, it's a long list of diseases that starts, with an inflammatory state. So I think there's so many interesting directions that, and more recently I saw something on the longevity side that I thought was like really interesting too. I can't remember who did the actual study, but He was quoted by Dr. Rhonda Patrick on longevity for omega-3 consumption, and that was measured in red blood cells, the omega-3 index. And when we look at the omega-3 index, which is basically how much index in percentage of omega-3 do you have in your blood cells and red blood cells, you can see that the average American is around like 4, or maybe even below 4%. And when they took the group and they looked at it and they got to 8%, which probably is a more optimal range, which is less than 80% of the population. So it's like a small population is up in that field. And when they looked at like different aging markers, they saw they were comparing a group of smokers. And we know smoking, I don't think anybody will argue anymore that smoking is good for longevity or anything else. Like,
No way.
No. So we saw the smoking group, they averaged saw a decline in lifespan around 4 or 5 years. But they saw the group that had lower levels of omega-3 declined equally versus the group that had optimal levels of omega-3. So you actually saw like even the group of smokers that had high omega-3, they actually looked on the graph that they were doing slightly better than the group that was non-smokers but had no like low omega-3. So my point is more to say when we see these big studies comparing, and again there's a lot of things underneath, but where there's at least an indication that it has such a profound impact on longevity as well. Like comparing if you had enough omega-3 in your diet would be equally to you being a smoker or non-smoker. I think people would be what? Is that for real? Like, is this an impact? And they would have no knowledge and awareness of their personal omega-3 index. And I think the future of that is also then, how do we measure that so we can get the transparency? You know, we're big proponents of we're big believers in transparency and getting the transparency out first so that we can act on data. Right? And I think that there's something here where we can go deeper. But I think that's very exciting to see that it's such a critical part of, living a healthy life.
Amen. Yeah. I mean, there's probably a bit of healthy user bias there too. Like people who have higher levels of omega-3s in their blood, like might be more inclined to be pescatarian, or just the mere act of the behavior of regularly consuming fish might,
For sure.
That might imply that somebody's more health conscious than somebody who's regularly eating fast food.
For sure.
But yeah, no, I mean, we know the role of omega-3s in the inflammatory process as a way of, pumping the brakes on the inflammatory cascade. And yeah, the omega-3 index is, I think, super interesting.
Yeah.
Bill Harris, I think, is the researcher who's sort of pioneered that through Omega Quant. And I got mine tested about a year ago.
And it looked pretty good, right?
Yeah, it was super good. Yeah, it was like optimal. I don't know. It was like 9 or 11 or something somewhere in that range.
You're taking some good quality fish oil.
I am. Thanks for keeping me stocked up.
I am, yeah. No, but I think that's exciting to see that it works as well. And I think as the side note again, we want to get vast majority from food. So again, like food choices impact omega-3 decisions quite a lot. Can you pick when you're buying like animal food, something that is like more free range, living wild, pasture raised, you'll get a little omega-3 into your diet from there as well. There's routes, obviously, eating more fish. There's we talked about, I think the last time as well, the salmon, the herring, the mackerel, like the big fatty fish that's, such a critical, good source of omega-3s, basically.
Yeah.
Which people are not consuming a lot of.
No. Do you think that people that regularly consume, because I don't personally regularly consume fatty fish. Do you think that people who that there's still value in supplementing with fish oil for somebody who regularly consumes fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring?
I know I'm biased because of what I do, so I know that, and I know that I regularly consume fish, and I would still consume it. I also see some valid reasons for maybe not just hitting like the 2 milligrams of omega-3 in your diet a day, which are like on the higher scale for most people. I do see that when I've been a little deeper into it for myself and my own personal consumption, I've had even higher higher intake of omega-3s for various reasons, right? So I'm not recommending to go higher than that, but unless you have somebody you're working with, like a doctor and so on, that you can do, or you can actually get your blood measured, like that's what. But the short answer is I see the benefit of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm super, super grateful to have access to Puori omega-3s. I mean, I take them every day. And there are some, if I tend to supplement in the morning, And were I to eat salmon or fish or whatever, it would probably be for dinner. And so I don't like, I will still supplement regardless of, my fish intake.
And I think like consistency.
Consistency is the name of the game.
It's the name of the game, especially for something like this.
Yeah.
So consistency.
One of the things I love about you guys is that you really focus on the foundational supplements, the supplements that have the most robust evidence. Obviously everybody is now talking about creatine. And you guys have a really great creatine. Maybe you can talk about creatine sourcing. That's another common question that I get asked. Like, how do I pick the right creatine? Because now everybody's talking about it. There have been a number of studies connecting creatine to cognitive health, and I think there's only more coming.
Sure.
As we learn more about the impact that creatine has on brain health and cognitive health and mental health. So maybe you can talk about creatine sourcing.
Yeah, let me do that. So creatine actually is interesting and so the Puori brand in general, what we're trying to do is create like the common supplements, as you said, but do them uncommonly well. Like consistency, again, is the key here, and practicing like virtuosity of like, how can we continue to deliver on those metrics we defined before to get a really good quality high-end product in for the end user. Now, when we talk creatine, it's actually our first like not natural product. It comes from a process where you're synthesizing two different compounds basically in when you then create the creatine component out of that. So it's synthesized in a lab basically. So what you want to look for there is, I think right now the creatine market is exploding. It really is. So when that happens, you gotta it's a little less impacted by raw material. So we haven't seen like for the end users like these crazy price increases like you would see if that was to, let's say, an omega-3 or if you see these explosions, it's a supply demand. Here you can a little easier create more in the facilities. But when that happened, you also see a lot of new facilities jumping out there. So you would be more concerned that are they manufacturing under GMP certifications? And I think that's probably number one step when you're looking at it. Are they having GMP certifications? They have to live up to some really high quality standards in like the cleaning, like how they handle the production, everything. Like it's pharma standards. So the pharma industry have set really high standards for this out of safety reasons. So if you can use that in your food supplements as well, that's a really good place to start. Then secondly, when the pure ethos of like when we are creating a new product, there's like a few components we have to consider like in-house. One is the purity side of it. Like if everything is pure, like it's not like we can do a much better job than any others, And then the second is like our audience, are they asking for it? Because we have a very loyal group of people who care a lot about these purity markers. So they will ask us, what chocolate should I eat? What we can't answer all those questions, unfortunately. Like now I'm like venturing into food, but even for creatine, we saw that was actually one of the number one products in a survey we did without like 1,000 customers were answering. And I think it was like across demographics and so on was the number one product people were requesting. So we thought, okay, there's something here. So we start going out, and what we looked at is like, okay, is there purity? Is there any like heavy metals or residual solvents from the facilities? Is there any other things we could be aware of that could sneak into the product? So that was one thing we wanted to test for. So we like when the Clean Label project that does all our testing, so they do independent batch testing of every single batch of every single product we do up against a variety of like different markers. They were testing for label claim. So again, and I think label claim is something to be aware of. I think there's a lot that's like probably on the lower side of what they're claiming. Impurity markers like heavy metals still seem relevant, though it is not nearly as crucial as it is in like protein powders. And then residual solvents. We also test for pesticides and so on. That's like Clean Label's panel that they're using, so they have to go through that as well. But I think those are the key. Maybe you can take bisphenols and some of these things into it from packaging. It looks like the industry has done a little bit better job of removing that out of manufacturing based on what we see in the lab reports. So I would say GMP certified, high quality product, that's a good starting point. Simple ingredient list. Some of them has a lot of different flavors or textures or other things to do things. Active, like a third-party test of the active ingredient, especially if you venture into gummies. So I think what we've seen in some of the, independent studies that has been done. I haven't seen like a big organization like the Clean Label Project or EWG or some of these big institutions that will do like a broader category study. I haven't seen that yet on creatine. I hope it will come. So just for the transparency for consumers. But until then, what we've seen floating around on the internet is like some brands has bought like XYZ of the gummies, and they saw that some of them contain no creatine. It was like 1%, less than 1% creatine. So I would say go with the creatine monohydrate form, which is kind of like the one that's been tested most in studies and so on. And go with something that NSS certified. Try to avoid a lot of other things in it. Like we actually add taurine, which is an amino acid that we think complement the product quite a lot. But like go as simple as possible. Clean Label Project certified when possible with the transparency. Unfortunately, no other brand is doing that yet. NSF certification is another good certification to also do. They don't do batch testing and share the data, so you actually don't know. But they're really good at looking into the supply chain and checking up that they're having the right manufacturing practices in place. Sorry, that was a long one.
No,
but
it's appreciated though,
and I think it's important in this growth market. I would be even more like just pay attention. Or if you have a brand that you find credible for anything else that you're using, you can go in that route.
Yeah, I mean, when there's unbridled enthusiasm about any supplement, you just want to be really careful, because a lot of products suddenly will flood the market, and it's like eventually there's counterfeiting products, but even because counterfeiting implies malicious intent to mislead consumers, but even among companies who try to put actual creatine in their products, the gummy issue is a really great illustration of where, not every manufacturer is aware that creatine, for example, isn't stable in solution.
No.
So, depending on my understanding of the science of putting the food science of putting creatine in gummies is it strongly depends on where in the production line or the production process the creatine was added. If it's added when the gummies are still like in a liquid form, then it's going to break down into its breakdown product, which I believe is creatinine.
Yeah.
But then if it's added later, once the gummy's already kind of like solidified, then there's a higher likelihood of it
actually
staying, being conserved. So it's super interesting, but that's just like, manufacturers don't know that, consumers don't know that.
And on a personal note, like when you have something like that, like I wouldn't start there. I would start with the powder.
Exactly.
I like without knowing, like I'm sure our science team, like back at the office, will know much more about like how they're actually like they're looking into this. But again, when you even just from a logic perspective, if you've seen some of these gummies where you need to consume 5 gummies of this size, like not that big, small gummies, and you get 5 grams of creatine, and you have no like chalky or like almost sandy chew to it. Already there, I would be skeptical as a consumer, knowing that creatine will be a little bit, even though you can finally make it into a super fine powder. You would still have that little bit of like sandy feeling to it.
Yeah, graininess.
Yeah, graininess. Yeah, that's a better word. So from that alone, like you would actually have to consume quite a lot of gummies to get to 5 grams of creatine, which is, I think, what a lot of using as the gold standard, at least in the U.S.
Yeah.
So,
how do you? A question that I get asked a lot, and it's a frustrating question because I completely understand where it's coming from, but women will ask me what creatine I recommend for women, as if there's this expectation that there should be a difference.
Yeah, I don't think there should be a difference. I think it should be creatine monohydrate again. Yeah. Plain and simple. Yeah. And then you can look at like, okay, should you dose them on a slightly lower dose to begin with? Obviously, there might be a body mass size difference.
Exactly.
So that like the consumption by your muscles will probably be much smaller compared to, let's say, a larger male. But the brain, and that's something different. I don't think there might be the biggest consumption difference on that.
No, yeah,
so
exactly.
We haven't seen too much yet. There's a few people that are looking into body weight as part of it, like the equation of measuring how much you should take. But it looks like if you are consistent again over a longer period of time, you don't have to do these like bulking periods that we know from bodybuilding days, or even from like cognitive health perspective. You're doing some larger doses to get more saturated into the brain as well, quicker. But it looks like if you're staying a little bit, again, more consistent, you avoid that. And you avoid the second question we get is, do I get bloated? Or, will I see myself more bloated? And again, you get intracellular water retention, which is actually a good thing. It's not in like the puffiness you see like around like a heavy night out or something like that. It's not that type of bloating. So it's really being great at like getting more like water into the cells. So from that perspective, that will again improve. We see that in all the like physiological components of like a better physical experience when training and so on. So I think there's a lot to be gained here. And also anecdotally, of all the women we have starting to take it, I feel they are the ones that are feeling the biggest impact. And they're most excited when they get going on it. So, yeah.
Well, also, I mean, there are sex differences in terms of the endogenous production of creatine. So we naturally make creatine in our bodies, and there are sex differences there in terms of the quantity made. There are changes that occur with perimenopause and menopause, but then also the benefits that one might see from supplemental creatine are, I think, also modulated by how much red meat and fish one tends to eat, right? Like if you're eating an F ton of red meat on a daily basis, you might not necessarily see the ergogenic, like the physical performance boosting benefits of supplementary creatine the way that somebody who's like more prone to vegetarianism or somebody who is who is more meat avoidant might see those benefits. And many women, unfortunately tend to fear animal source foods. And so women in particular, it would stand to reason that women would see really significant benefits.
And to your point as well, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, I would say it's even more important that you're adding that to your diet, right? So,
amen. Yeah.
And even just having it from that. Now we talk. So here's a fun actually segue into the difference between food, supplements, and pharma, right? Like to that component we talked about before. Like this is one that's actually still harder to get. Like your body might produce, let's say, 1.5 gram or something like that a day, like in your body. So you can produce that creatine by yourself. But like getting to 5 grams then from food is still pretty hard.
Yeah.
So here is one thing where even if I were to, let's say, eat my, the proteins and, I was focused on getting a lot of I would still have a harder time to hit that consistently.
Amen. Yeah. Like Sean Baker, probably, Sean Baker, carnivore guy. He probably would, he probably would not. He doesn't supplement with creatine, and he probably wouldn't even see much of a benefit from supplementing with 5 grams of creatine a day because he eats so much red meat. But for the rest of us,
it's really hard to get to that point. Yeah. And I think if you then look into the brain side of it, a lot of these benefits are coming at higher doses.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to hit that with food, those levels.
So here you have something where it's, it's pretty much impossible from a cost perspective, but also from a, logical or physiological feeling perspective, hitting it from food.
Yeah.
So it's more optimizing than just reaching goals, right?
Yeah. And I want women, just while we're on the topic, I want women to get out of the habit of asking, like, is this a good supplement for women? The dose might be different as compared to men, but women's supplements, I feel like, can be marked up. Like women tend to overpay, right? The so-called pink tax on products that are formulated and targeted marketing wise, especially to women. Like I think we should get out of this mindset of thinking about like what's being marketed specifically for women, and just think about the ingredient and how much of that ingredient do I need?
Yeah. I think that's a good point. And, I would love to go more in that direction as well. Like, that's what we're doing with the Transparency Project, is just like getting the knowledge also on the ingredients and on all the stuff you don't want from your ingredients. So, I would love to get in that direction for, measuring out different individuals' needs and being much more personalized.
Yeah. Which isn't to say, of course, like there aren't certain supplemental needs that women,
will be different in different periods, for sure.
Not an expert in that, but like, and there are many other people who can speak more specifically to the personalized nutrition needs of women across the lifespan. But yeah, this whole idea that we've been led to believe from the marketing side of things that like women need a specific form of creatine or a specific protein powder for them. I think that's just nonsense. Yeah,
especially with these like raw simple ingredients. Yeah, dosage for sure there might be differences, but like they don't need a different type so far.
Yeah. So when it comes to, so creatine, that was all super helpful. And then protein. I know that you guys create like a number of really great protein options for people. Maybe you can talk a little bit about when selecting a protein powder, what to look out for.
Yeah, I think for the protein side of it, again, that's actually where the purity becomes even more important. Because protein comes from natural sources, it's concentrated sources, so it's even more important. So there's a lot of things to look for, and we'll kind of break that down in a second. The other component is when you're taking protein powder, you're taking quite a large dose. So like if it's 20 grams, 30 grams, 40 grams, somebody is taking like it's a big spoon compared to, let's say, a capsule where a potential of, let's say, a pollutant as lead or any heavy metal that could be in there will be in a smaller dose just by the nature of the size, right? So protein powder, you take a big dose, you often take it like regularly, like part of your morning smoothie or after your workout. So here, purity comes even more to play. If I had no knowledge, again, I sincerely believe driving the future forward where we actually have knowledge when we have these risk categories. So a risk category like protein powder should have a lab test mandatory for heavy metals, in my opinion. When we see 47% of a category is off, basically, it should be enough to set in some guardrails. Anyway, when that's not present, I would go with a whey-based protein over a plant-based protein. I'll do that for a few reasons. One is the purity side, because we see that the plant-based protein tend to be much better at accumulating the heavy metals out of the soil where it's often coming from for various reasons, versus like going through the animal and actually being almost cleansed before it hit the whey. So that's one side. The other side is the actual amount of amino acids and protein. The bioavailability of that protein you're consuming is often superior in whey. So when you're taking like a protein powder, it's often as a add-on to your diet of protein. You want to get the highest quality. That being said, you can have various reasons for not tolerating it, for not, appreciating it in any ways. So plant protein is definitely important for a big community that is, maybe not getting enough protein from their diet as well, and having like vegetarian options and so on. So again, in the plant side, I would just be even more concerned if I had like a third-party test result or somebody who really cared about the purity of the ingredients. So that's the part. If we look at flavors, something else to be aware of, one route is to say, okay, you can go all unflavored. We know that the vast population will go with some kind of flavor. Vanilla tend to be a better option from a purity perspective. Cacao, even though, for those who know me, I have a love for cacao beans and dark chocolate and so on, but cacao is a really good food at, again, removing cadmium, lead out of the soil, and often grown in these type of soils where there will be exposure to this. So what we've seen through the lab testing is, there's a big variation is one side on the cacao beans, but there tend to be higher markers of these heavy metals. So if you don't know anything, I wouldn't go with a plant-based cacao product. That would be like a
heavy metal bomb.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And that's not what you're looking for, right? So
yeah, that was a bit hyperbolic. I don't want to fear monger, like you probably want here and there, probably totally safe, totally fine. But
I think the stats showed that 77% of the plant was above proposition 65, which is ridiculous high stat, right? So
well, it's like you're not buying a protein powder to consume once in a blue moon. You're buying it to consume regularly, right?
It's part of your protein goal.
As part of your protein goal, yeah. So if you're consuming it regularly, don't you want to buy the product least likely to have heavy metal contaminants?
You should, right? Like especially in that population, I would say it makes even more sense. And the plant proteins often tend to be fairly expensive. So it's like it's marketed for the group of people who care a lot about health and quality in general. So I think there's something to be aware of there. I think so. So rolling that backwards, like go with a simple, if you're totally out, like a non-flavored whey protein is like a very good baseline if you don't have third-party validation data. But if you have like the Clean Label Project's validation data, on the back of the Puori protein powders, even the cacao ones, you'll find like the QR code, you scan it, you can see it takes you to Clean Label Project's website, you'll look at the batch number and you can see, oh, here's the batch I have in hand, and it will show you, and it will also show you that there is traces of cadmium or lead in it, because that's impossible to avoid in the measuring like of cacao beans. So you'll actually see that in there, and you can make your educated consumption strategy based on that.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, I love the cacao. And like I saw one of our latest batches, so we've done a lot like over the time. It had much lower level than I've seen in a long time. So I'll say, okay, for this, I'll go a little more crazy on cacao smoothies. But I also love my my dark chocolate at night, right? So, and I don't have any transparency knowledge around that. The most sophisticated tool I have right now is variation, which is like ridiculously unsophisticated when you look at the potential for.
But it's very smart.
That's the only way you can get
Say
around
that again.
it, right?
Wait, your unsophisticated way of minimizing exposure is just variation.
Is variation.
Yeah, I think that's actually really smart and intuitive. Like that's a good rationale to cycle. Most foods.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like if you're just like somebody who's eating raw spinach in your smoothie every single day, well, that could be oxalate overload. And if you're prone to kidney stones, like that's why it's valuable, not just to minimize exposure to things that you don't necessarily want to overconsume, but to minimize or to optimize your exposure to nutrient diversity.
Sure. Yeah, but so variation is a big thing.
Yeah.
But I still feel like when I'm buying that dark chocolate bar in the market, and I'm like, okay, I will take this organic this time. I'll try this one another time. I'm like knowing that when we've also seen the studies that are also done in the US or done in Europe, some of these are like quite big load of like cadmium, especially in lead in these bars. So like it feels so, it feels like we're a little past that time where we aren't able to actually provide that data. So hopefully somebody out there is listening to this and say, hey, I should buy like a clean label certified and create a clean label certified chocolate brand. Call me if you do. That's for sure. Yeah,
that'd be dope.
But I think, and that's actually, I think, one more important piece of the puzzle we talked about before, because sometimes, and I had a conversation with like Dr. Wendy Myers as well about this, where we were talking about sometimes like the food supplement industry, which is concentrated foods. Let's say they have to oblige to Proposition 65 and heavy metals. It's actually really super strict compared to the foods.
And that's just a California thing, but California's a huge market, so it's
California's a huge market,
it
right?
kind of that prop has brands by the
for sure.
cojones.
for sure.
Because California's such a huge market.
Especially in the health and wellness industry, right, as well. But if you're saying, you might have, really strict standards on that on supplements, but you don't have it on your, sweet potatoes or your rice or, any other food groups that might actually be contaminated with these things where we have no knowledge and there's nobody like trying to live up to it. So I feel for that rep, like, what I would love to see is like us being a little bit better at, mapping out the different foods groups with high risk of contamination. And let's get some validation. Let's do some, category studies there. Find out if there is an issue. If there's an issue, let's put in some guardrails. Like that should be the way around. And I think like whether it's, I think the general population, even the governments are thinking more this way now. Like if we can actually get some guardrails in on this, it would make sense, because you can see when the consumer groups, they do these studies and they talk, it gets a lot of attention because consumers want to buy the best possible products. So yeah.
Farmers aren't going to like it, but I mean, yeah, why not as a consumer?
If farmers going to have a harder time, but also then they got to figure out, like farmers are good at too, then figuring out, okay, if vast majority of the lead that we're seeing is coming from X, Y, C that we know we've been doing, let's get rid of that process.
Yeah.
I saw the other day in Danish TV, they were like there's been a focus on drones lately. But I saw like the farmers, they were like targeting, like they were flying over all their fields with drones to minimize pesticides use on their fields, because obviously one thing is cheaper, but it's also much better for the environment, obviously, to not like bombard a full field because they saw like an invasive crop coming in on their field, and then they could go micro-target it and use, they were saying, I think 90% less pesticides, right? So I thought, well, that's pretty smart. Like I would love to be organic and they didn't have to use pesticide and we were going away from that side. But even like the farmers, my point is to circle back, they will find ways that actually end up maybe even impacting them possibly, because these farmers were saying it from a financial perspective. They used less pesticide that they had to buy to remove a problem instead of like just, let's just bombard this field with pesticides, right? I'm a firm believer that we will change based on, people still want to try to be better, but if there's a financial interest in it as well, it will change.
Yeah.
So consumers demand, it should change.
And also I think farmers now are, we're starting to gather more data on the health risks of occupational exposure to, chemical inputs like various herbicides and pesticides. And so it's like know better, do better, and because also farmers are consuming these crops too. So if they can feed healthier, crops with lower levels of contaminants to their families, like why wouldn't they?
No, for sure.
Yeah. Very valuable stuff. I want you guys to come out with an unflavored protein powder, because sometimes you guys are really good, like very subtle with your flavoring, but I do occasionally get like flavor fatigue. There's just so many things, like so many flavored powders and stuff, that it would be nice to have something that just has like nothing, because whey protein by itself has like a subtly sweet flavor.
Yeah, it has a little bit, especially if it's a concentrate.
Yeah.
Because then it's like less broken down, and like the sweetness is actually more contained. So yeah, I stay tuned. Stay tuned. Yeah.
But I think the emphasis on whey is very smart. Like, I don't have anything against plant protein per se, but I think if you're adopting a healthy habit and you're spending the money on it, like whey is going to be way higher, no pun intended, way higher quality. It's about 11% leucine, and you want to generally hit about 2.5 grams of leucine per protein shake. And so a 25 grams of whey protein is going to give you about, because it's 10 to 11%, it's going to give you at least 2.5 grams of leucine. Whereas I will often look at the back of plant protein powders, and you'll see 25 grams of plant protein. And then if you're lucky, and they even reveal on the back of the product the amino acid profile, you'll see 25 grams of protein in the serving, but like 1.8 grams of leucine.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not going to be effective for you to stimulate muscle protein synthesis.
No. You need.
That's a really important nuance that I hope I communicated well. But like, you want 25 grams of protein, 2.5 grams of leucine as a minimum to stimulate muscle protein synthesis per bolus, per meal.
Sure.
And whey gets you there.
Whey gets you there.
Yeah.
I think even like in 20 grams, we get 2.6 out of ours normally.
2.6?
Out
of 20 grams of? Wow.
And it's 6 grams of brain-changed amino acids.
Amazing.
And so it is like a dose of BCAAs at the same time, right? So
yeah.
It's a good quality product. And that's actually something to be aware of. Most plant proteins, again, if you're going up in that high dose, you're also getting a much more of the plant protein. And when they do these big category studies, the plant protein often serves smaller doses because they want to stay below Prop 65. Some because of protein is expensive. So if you recommend 10 grams a day, it's less, right? So we actually, for safety reasons, recommend 10 grams of our plant protein. So we've just said, like, that's what we want to set as the bar. If you want to go higher, you should probably go to something else, or you should scan the report code yourself and see if you feel comfortable on getting like above, because you have the data. So again, back to that point, I'm a firm believer we should have the data on these big food groups where it's a necessity, where we see this high impact, and then the consumers can make educated decisions.
Amen.
Yeah. So we'll push, and I hope that more brands are like looking into it and want to go down that like third-party transparency route where they can actually do that, because that's going to be like a driving force for the industry, and it's going to also eliminate some of that stuff that we're seeing, the bad rep we're getting in the industry. If we can show these things, we're showing like it's significantly safer probably to consume, our protein powder than it is to consume like many just natural food sources that will have a much higher content of heavy metals.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. Like,
we don't know, yeah.
So at that point, yeah.
It's like the dark matter of food.
Exactly.
Yeah, we just don't know. Well, you guys have a great reputation in the industry, so thanks for doing what you do. This was super fun and enlightening, and it's always a blast when we get to
it's going to be a good weekend having you here in Copenhagen.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I love it here. I mean, I've been to Scandinavia a few times, but this is my first time here, and I'm pumped. So thanks for making it all happen.
It's so good to have you here, and again, it's like, it's so good to have more people coming over and seeing like what we're doing here, so we can kind of learn from each other, right? Like there's so much learning across the board here that, is exciting. So yeah.
Pumped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Oliver. You are the man.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening. Love you all. Share this episode with friends and loved ones that you think may benefit from it. If this episode resonated with you, consider leaving that rating and review on your podcast app of choice. Spotify, Apple. It's a free and easy way to support what we're doing here. And I will catch you on the next episode. Peace, everybody. Boom.
Boom.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.